I guess it's been about 4 years now since I've gone through a massive cycle, starting back in 2012 and intensifying really in 2016, 15, 16, 17, 18, hitting a peak, 19, slowly coming down, 2020. I've been in rejuvenation since the lockdown, and I really want to just share some information with everybody, because I wish I would have come across some of these teachings and learnings, information a long time ago. I think they would have really helped me navigate the waters better, understanding where to put my focus and energy when things got really intense. So I invite you here, hopefully at the right time, for you to receive the information that you need in order to move past some of the roadblocks and challenges that we're currently facing collectively in society. And yeah, navigate these waters with wisdom and hopefully make the proper changes to the way we interact with ourselves, with consciousness, with the world, with the people we love, with our friends, family, communities, so that we can alter the course of humanity in a responsible way, given the information that we're given, that we have access to. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that. And so this is me playing my part and sharing some of the things that I've learned to add to solutions and to help people be better equipped as they move through their own activation, their own awakening. So I'm going to start by sharing some information. This first segment, hopefully we'll be doing many more. And this is really coming from a place of a lot of experience, a lot of mistakes, and a lot of learning, putting myself out there and confronting things layer by layer, and slowly being able to navigate these waters more responsibly. I'm just really happy to be here, to be alive, and to be in a space where I can share. Because if I can help anybody out there, that is my ultimate goal. This first video is called The Natural versus the Artificial Grid. Challenges of our times, and learning to feel the difference between what a natural grid is, what the artificial grid is, so that we can navigate things properly within our minds, within our consciousness, within our waking life, within our dream life. And so I broke it down into, 3 main bodies that become affected when interacting with these different grids: the physical, the mental, and the emotional. AI is the artificial grid, artificial intelligence. What is that? What does it mean? So we have 2 main landscapes that we're dealing with. We have many, many more, but the ones that are in our face, in our faces right now, that are poking and prodding us, there's the organic one, and then there's the artificial one. So we have the spiral and we have the cube. The organic is the earth, the human beings, the multidimensional human beings around us, souls incarnate, the earth, the animals, the plants, the minerals, the planets, the celestial bodies moving outwards. And that is the natural grid. When we're connecting with the natural grid, it's a very soft energy, it's a very healing energy. Our heartbeat slows when we're out in the forest. Our senses, even if they've been activated through a Kundalini activation or some other form of mystical activation, will naturally be heightened. So our senses being heightened, connecting with the natural grids, is a way different experience than connecting with the artificial grids. Our heartbeat slows, our emotions calm, and our mind calms, our thoughts clear. In that space we can heal. We can bring healing in through that space, through the natural grid. The things that are being reflected back to us on the natural grid, through the natural grid, is healing. Nature, the beauty, the wonder, all of the animals, all of the plants. When we're synchronizing more deeply with our environment because we've been activated, we are receiving authentic information from our natural environment, which helps guide us to make choices in our day-to-day lives that is in sync with the whole, with our natural environment, which is in sync with our natural rhythms, natural circadian rhythms, with our friends and family, with our community, with the world at large. So ultimately connecting to that interconnected web, which is the organic web, will help us make decisions, better decisions, based on the whole of humanity. Everything ripples outwards like a web, spider web. Moving one side will create a ripple all the way to the other side. And when we're connected to the natural grid, we're connected to everybody else's energy body through the mindscape, through the consciousness of those other humans out there, each other. And the connection is very different than through the artificial grid. It's deeper, it's subtler, and it's a natural way of taking in energy and putting out energy. The elements, the water, the fire, the earth, the air, cleanse, heal, recalibrate. They are ultimately divine intelligence, divine design, working to restore and to destroy anything within us that is not promoting our evolution. I'm thinking now about being in nature, and already I'm feeling a soothing effect. When you begin to activate and awaken, connecting to this grid is paramount, especially if you've had a Kundalini activation, because right now the way that I see Kundalini activations is it's not a very healthy thing. It's not a very good thing. Under most cases, in most situations. And I've been hearing a lot of feedback from other people about this. There was a huge kind of campaign. There's a lot of people working in that energy, but it's the Kundalini energy is first, second, and third chakra. In a sense, triangulation. It's a lot of darker energies, denser energies. And unless you're in a proper container, in a safe container to work through those energies, it's going to be life-threatening. It could literally kill you. It can steal years off your life. So I will probably be making a video in the future about the negative effects of Kundalini and how working with that energy requires absolute knowledge and discipline. This is why when you go in for Kundalini yoga classes, it's a really long process. It's a really arduous process. And that's for a reason. So all of these Tantra workshops and other type of, people that haven't done the healing work on themselves, activating that energy is very destructive in a negative way. So although there's been a fad of it, it has to be done with masters. It has to be done in the right container. So either way, if you've activated on one level or another and your senses open up, you're going to experience things like enhanced sensory abilities. So you're going to feel more, you're going to smell more, taste more. Everything's going to be more. Sensations. It's basically opening you up to the cosmos, to the infinite possibility of existence. Like this, just everything opens up, and we're connected to even I was feeling the weather move around the globe. I was feeling different things move around in my environment that were like kilometers away. And so opening up and being activated, I spent a lot of time in nature, and it really, really, really saved me on a mental level, because when the Kundalini activates, if it's not managed properly, it basically blows your mind open, and a lot of people experience forms of psychosis, different dealing with different energies, different entities, different consciousness, layers of consciousness, bodies of consciousness. And we have to be really careful, because right now, what I see happening and what I've experienced, and the reason why I'm making this video, is because since the internet got implemented and technology just started to boom, there's another grid that is on lockdown over the natural grid, and that's the artificial grid. The artificial grid is basically energy moving through all of these artificial human designed products. So the cell phones and the routers and the towers, the computers. And so this energy also communicates. It's also a web, and it is also transferring data at a really fast pace. And so connecting to this grid, to the artificial grid, when you're going through an activation and your senses have opened up, is a whole different sensation. There's no natural feedback loop like with the earth, where you're giving and taking and things are being replenished. The artificial grid just takes. It basically is harvesting energy. And you'll kind of feel it when you're, touching electronics for too long. You'll feel the static build up in your fingers. That's the first sign that you need to go out and ground in nature. But on an etheric level, we've also created these entities of consciousness which exist through AI. And they're just as real as the natural grids of consciousness that humans have created, but they function on a different level with the physical, mental, and emotional body. So the physical body, it's draining, it's not vitalizing like the natural grid. On the emotional body, It's very harsh. It's very stimulating on to the mind, and to the emotional body. So even social media aside, just the apps and the way that we interact with these devices makes a connection to the mind, to the natural, to the human consciousness. And so as much as I have experienced telepathy and, thinking of someone so much and then having them call me, for example, like I documented so many cases of things happening just so that I could prove to myself what was going on. Because there's a lot of, is this really happening? What is this? There's a lot of confusion that happens at first. And I documented enough, and I've just witnessed enough to understand that this stuff is real. We just haven't explained it yet. We haven't been able to explain it with science, or science has chosen. I think there's many forks in the road that science has made, depending on who's been funding it and what sort of information they want to expose or repress. But science has not really spent too much, too much time exploring that. It's mostly been profit driven. So we are connecting through the artificial grid, and that consciousness that we connect with when we're connecting with the artificial grid also has the capability of sending us messages. And for example, like some of the apps, when I was at the peak of my activation, I would get woken up by my phone, like the ringer's off, I have it in the corner, and I'd literally wake up and there would be a message, and it was happening constantly. And then I started to track, the same like I did with the natural grid, like what is happening here? What is my consciousness connecting to? And it was connecting to the artificial grid, to the messages, incoming messages, to people trying to contact me through, the electronics. And you come to realize how powerful this stuff is. But the artificial grid is a lot harsher on the body. And the way that the energy comes in, whether it's mental or emotional or physical, is felt on a different level. And it never felt rejuvenating. It always felt depleting. So I started to do a lot more research on AI. Not because I was interested in it. I actually had absolutely no interest whatsoever. But because it was affecting me so much. And, a lot of people, as you go through these different stages of activation, awakening, now when someone's talking to me and sharing their experience, I definitely don't put them in the crazy category, because a lot of this stuff I've experienced myself. So I know for a fact that this stuff is real. And when I started doing research on, exactly what AI is and where it's going, I came to learn that there has been so much work towards pushing, creating this artificial grid that now surrounds the globe. There's like hundreds of satellites surrounding the globe right now, ensuring that every little corner of the globe has access to the internet. And that acts like as a veil over the globe. So it's like a layer of consciousness where people are connecting that exists. And also there's the worldwide grid, which is, there's tons of projects that have been built, connecting computers together, universities, the databases, and also using tons of private computers. So anybody that signs up to be, to have their server be used by this, by the worldwide grid, basically when they're off their computer, that extra processing power gets used to basically used up by AGI, so the general artificial intelligence machines that are, looking to solve problems and using as much juice as they can everywhere. But this creates like this veil that wraps around the natural grid. And until you've activated and woken up, you won't necessarily feel this. And potentially you might not even understand anything that I'm saying if you have never experienced any of this stuff. But for those that are in the crux of it and that are actually feeling it, what my guidance is to really learn to separate the artificial grid from the natural grid, and constantly ask yourself when you're being pulled by a certain energy, or it could even be a person, is this coming in through the artificial grid? Like, is someone sending me a message right now? Look for those confirmations, write them down. Or is this person just thinking of me? Am I being woken up by my telephone? Because, there's an app running in the background that I haven't turned off. Or there's a bunch of, apps that were installed on my computer without my consent or knowledge that are running in the background, using up my processing power. Is just the telephone itself too close to my being, especially when you're sleeping. Knowing the difference between all of these is that really helped me begin to make sense of this greater understanding of, these different layers of consciousness that we're tapping into. So separating those is really important as you're making your way through the awakening, through different levels of consciousness, knowing what you're tapping into, knowing what energy is tapping into you, and setting clear boundaries. We are ultimately choosing, but we have to know what's out there, right? Like, ignorance is, we don't know until we know. So this is why sharing information is so important. But that ignorance can sometimes kill us because we don't understand. If we can't make sense of it within our bodies, within our minds, within our experience here, then it's very difficult to manage it and come on top of it. So we have to be able to separate those. That's one part of it. And I know there's a lot of people out there that have gone way more into detail with this stuff. And if you decide to look into it, you can definitely get some really good information. I've been researching this stuff, and I'm still going to continue to learn and grow. So potentially down the line, I'll be putting out more videos with more details. But this is just right off the cuff. I just wanted to start this channel up and go with what was on, in my heart and what I've experienced already. So that's the first part of distinguishing the natural versus the artificial grid. And the second part that I wanted to touch on was basically social media and the triangulation that happens within social media, feeding off the emotional body. So usually, especially now during lockdown, everybody's online. And people that have lit up, so they're Kundalini activated, or they're going through some sort of activation, awakening, whatever you want to call it, they are definitely going to be sharing more on the internet, individuating themselves, expressing themselves, coming into their soul's calling. And social media is the fastest way to get our energy out into the world. So we are using the artificial grid, and learning to use it responsibly is something, we're just babies right now using this technology. So doing the shamanic work with it. So after going through my activation and, looking at things energetically, there's all these sort of groups and tribes that form through social media, and basically people start bouncing ideas off of each other. And the people that have, that are trying to individuate themselves, naturally, we tend to push against things to distinguish what we are. So to know what we are, we have to know what we're not. And so there's this weird antagonistic play that starts to happen. And there was this one woman who I was tuning into at the beginning when I was going through like a really challenging time with social media and stuff. And she said, like, just don't play into the reindeer games. And she kept on repeating. And I, now looking back, I understand what exactly she meant. Because the mind games that happen online due to people pushing up against other people's ideas, and this goes deep into mimetic mediation and trying to find that dialectic between various tribes, can really destroy people emotionally, like their emotional body. And I'm looking at this from an energetic perspective, and we want to keep our emotional bodies intact. We want to grow. Being triggered is natural, but we are not naturally used to being confronted with thousands of opinions in, within an hour, all at once. And it seems like, when you're on social media, it seems like everybody's talking to you. When you go through an awakening, you are synchronizing with your environment more readily. You're opened up, you're synchronizing with your environment, and what ends up happening is this becomes like the schizophrenia of the online environment, where you feel like everybody's talking to you. And sometimes this causes conflicts and antagonism to build, and people start, this is how internet fights start to happen. Basically, people are, reading each other's stuff, and then you're building on it, and then there's an antagonistic play that happens. And people are really just trying to find themselves. But you also have dark entities out there. I'll use some other people's language to describe this, but the dark brotherhood or the dark goddesses, the people that feed off of emotional energy, the vampires, the people that are in it really going in with an agenda, like, all the political campaigns, and like there's some serious psychotechnology which was designed on a very scientific level to go in and infiltrate different groups online to essentially control the narrative of that group. And I encountered like all of it, you name it. And one of the, being in the position that I was in, being online and looking to set up my online business, I was really confronted with like these different layers that were happening, like the antagonistic layer, the online games, the mind games, and the emotional, the people just looking to like feed off of the emotional reactions, and then the psychotechnologies where people are seriously looking to basically mind control you to get you to go into a certain direction that fit their narrative, their agenda for whichever organization they were working for. So all of these different layers we're going to encounter when we go online, and you don't know until you know. But also the hive mind is very real, and there's also another layer that happens which isn't part of any of those layers, and that's simply like this collective synchronicity. So as if you're connected to the celestial bodies and the movements, which I recommend everyone should be, you're going to feel the energy heighten, and people will start talking about different topics at certain times because the energy is calling forth, right? So what we see reflected in the sky, depending on the planets, each planet represents a different energy and is going to bring that forth through the collective because people are feeling it collectively. So all of a sudden people will start talking about similar themes. And so oftentimes there would be a theme that would come up. And I noticed this was also something else that started, online wars is, for example, like a really, like a theme that we would consider close to heart, like to have opinion about, certain things in the world, our relationships with ourselves, how to act in the world. Those themes would bring up that collectively in everybody. So all of a sudden everybody starts talking about that stuff, and it almost seems like people are responding to each other's posts, but essentially they're not. And so often I experimented a lot, and I would write a post. So I'm feeling the energy come up. I would write it, but I wouldn't post it, and I'd keep it in my notes. And then the next morning I'd go online, or 2 days later, because I often feel energy a few days before, I would notice everybody's talking about that. So often I would stop myself from expressing myself because what I would be posting would be contrary to what I'd see other people post. And I know that everybody's feeding off of each other. Everybody is looking at each other's posts. So it's, we're all trying to act responsibly. Well, not all of us. Some of us are here just, it's like, the campaigns with the psychotechnologies and stuff like that, like they go in very from a mental level and just do the work to switch people's minds. But many of the people that I'm connecting with are really, just coming in to express themselves, and they're reading everybody else's expressions and trying to receive that information and, to grow from it. So it can be difficult sometimes when you have a theme come in through planetary alignments, and then everybody starts posting on that theme, and it almost seems like people are responding to each other when in fact they're not at all. And so it really requires people to be in their core essence, to be in their sovereignty. And until we've developed the tools to know who we are, to know thyself, and have really done the work to know thyself, it's very, very easy to get swayed and to go into that paranoid thinking that this person is responding to me, or they're trying to call me out on my shit, or, to get wrapped up into all these stories. So there's also that layer that happens, and that is very real, and that, triggers the emotional body out of whack completely. And this is a whole, there's a lot of the social dilemma. There's a few, documentaries and videos that came out like recently addressing this stuff, because children, young adolescents, we didn't have this. I didn't have this when I was a child. I'm old enough to not have lived through this, but a lot of the adolescents they've been living through it during, the most developmental periods of their lives. And the suicide rate has gone up enormously. Like, if you go look at the statistics, it is a really scary thing, the amount of young teenagers committing suicide due to all this weird stuff happening online. And so that is a whole other layer with the artificial grid that's going on. The AGI machines, the general intelligence machines, are looking to make sense of how human beings process sensory input, process information, so that it can build up its own general intelligence. But essentially this is a huge experiment that human beings are participating in. So for those people that are posting every day and that are participating in this online cacophony of expressions and sense making, has consented, even if they're not aware of it, to participating in the artificial grid of consciousness. And so I really had to slow down and think. After I received all that information, I really had to think about what it was that I wanted to participate in, how I wanted to share my information. And I didn't want to just simply become an extension of artificial intelligence. sitting at my computer, withering away, and not being alive in the world, in the natural grid. And right when I had come to a lot of these conclusions based off of the information that I had learned, the lockdown happened. And I had to make a choice. I had to, say, either I'm going to continue and just, like in the Matrix, live through my avatar, or I'm going to be disciplined about this and really set up some strong guidelines for myself about how much time I'm going to spend on it and who I'm going to let within my circle, both on the artificial grid and in the natural grid, affect my life, affect my consciousness. Because essentially, especially with the feminine energy, we are so receptive. And, if we're tuned into the wrong energies, like, that's just naturally what women do. We receive and we come to life, so I've always kind of envisioned the masculine as setting the stones and setting the logs for the fire, and then the feminine flame can dance. But if you have no proper foundation, the masculine or the grids of consciousness, if you're interacting with artificial consciousness, setting this really unhealthy foundation, you're going to go into chaos. You're not going to be dancing productively and creatively in a grounded way. You're going to be ripped apart. So I had to make really strong decisions, healthy decisions for myself regarding what I was going to tune into, how much time, how I should ground, and learning where my limits were in dealing with the electromagnetic energy coming out of the machines and what I wanted to participate in online. So just to give you an idea about like this feminine energy, not all females are so tuned in, but part of my genetics and my DNA is to be very, very open to energies and to be very connected to things. I was naturally born pretty extrasensory, and then when I went through the Kundalini awakening, it just like amplified everything. So not everyone is going to be able to relate to this, but I'm sure a lot of women listening and tuning into this can relate. So one morning I wake up and I start thinking about this satellite. I'm like, why am I thinking about this satellite? Like I was getting very specific information about a satellite, so I started typing in the information that I was receiving about the satellite. And there's like a tracker that you can go onto that I discovered that you can get the information of that particular satellite. So the satellite that I was tuning into was literally flying above my head at that time, that day. And when that happened, and there was a sense of urgency, and so I went in and I went into the person observing the satellite, and I got all the information, and then I put it together and I shared it on one of my private accounts. And I was like, why am I tuning into this information? And what I discovered was that, number one, I should not be tuned into this information. I should not be tuned into this artificial grid. Why is this satellite affecting my consciousness to the extent that I decide to do research on it because it's so present in my mind? And two, the urgency that I was feeling was because I later discovered, like the next day or the day after, I did a follow-up and I discovered that there was, it wasn't a satellite, it was like a space station, and there was a hole in the space station, and they were looking, the people in the space station were actually trying to find the hole because it was becoming an urgency, and basically the space station was gonna, I guess, blow up or I don't know what happens when the hole gets too big, but in the article it sounded like it was pretty dangerous, and they found it. And I had even the information that I collected before reading this article. I found the exact nodule, the part of the space station that the tear was in. Okay, so, what was this telling me? It was like a huge wake-up call. It was like our consciousness is being pulled in many directions, and the artificial grid is one of them. Artificial, right? This is not the natural grid. This is the artificial grid. Do I want to be connecting through the artificial grid? No. It's harsh on the system. It basically sucks your energy. It doesn't give anything back. All of the social media that we use on it basically destroys the emotional body. It can be used productively, but I've seen very few people use it productively. Like P2P, like, if you're doing peer-to-peer and, you're online and you're doing stuff like this, or you're speaking with someone and you're working on a project, that's one thing. But we're still affected by the energy that the machines emit and how they pull on our natural auric field and create like an accumulation of static energy, which drains every cell in our body, which runs on energy, electricity. So I think we're coming to a point now. I know they're trying to roll out more artificial intelligence in the next, 10 years. They kind of have mapped it out, and I'll get into that more in other videos. But I think we're really having to wake up to how it's affecting our consciousness right now and how we want to participate in it. And taking it from there, having discussions about it, putting out videos about your experience like I'm doing now, and sharing. And hopefully we can come together and take ownership collectively on which direction we want it to go in. I know that in Silicon Valley, some people have started to wake up and put together ethical boards, which I've been strongly suggesting within those communities to really look into detail about how this is affecting our human experience here on the planet Earth. Because until you've gone through an awakening or an activation, it's very difficult to understand the minute details of how it's affecting our thoughts, our minds, our interactions with each other, our interactions with the planet. And so for those of you that are awake, I hope that this has provided you with some guidance of how to distinguish the both and to share your experiences. The world needs to wake up to this, because the people that aren't sensitive to this energy are still being affected by it, even if they can't feel it. It's just happening on deeper levels. And if they're barely tapping into, their own experience, knowing themselves and barely tapping into their environment, they're not going to see all this stuff happening. But for those that are tapping in deep within and deep without, we know what's going on. So we have a responsibility, essentially, to share this stuff and be responsible agents in the world, because not sharing is being very irresponsible at this point in time, especially with the lockdown and everybody having to... I was so angry. Everybody's on their computers right now, and it's been a year, and it's not a good thing for the body, for the mind, for the soul. We need to get back out there. And we're going to find a way to get back out there and break down this lockdown. We have the possibility to connect, to unite, to gather all the information that we've been collecting, to share our wisdom and guidance with each other, to ensure that human consciousness, the natural grid, is the grid that we connect to way before the artificial grid. A healthy rhythm, a natural rhythm, so we can heal, so we can cooperate efficiently with each other, and so that we can step out of this triangulation.